Hi everyone, I'm Casey Wei, the short form programmer, here today with Kerr Holden and her film Judas Icarus Twists His Wrist. Today we talk about the film, Babe, Pig in the City, Original Babe, and a lot of other things, including metal music, editing, and wrestling. Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to the VIFF Podcast. This is your chance to get the inside track from the people behind the films you love and the films you're about to discover. This podcast was recorded on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations during the 43rd edition of the Vancouver International Film Festival. My name is Casey Wei, and I'm the short form programmer, here today with filmmaker Kerr Holden. Kerr's short film, Judas Icarus Twists His Wrist, played in Program 1 of the short forum. Kerr's film is difficult to describe, as it blends many styles and genres of moving image into one space, in which the titular subject, real-life wrestler Judas Icarus, injures his wrist while training for a match. Welcome, Kerr. So glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into the film, I'm super curious. How did you get into filmmaking?
I got into filmmaking at a pretty young age. I started when I was a kid, just adopting like the family VHS camcorder and stuff like that. And I think just like me and like some friends were just very curious about films and how they were made and had a lot of fun watching them together. So we would make like funny little horror movies together and stuff like that. And then I think just like from there, I've always been also like simultaneously with like live action film, I've always been very interested in animation and specifically like 3D animation and computer animation and visual effects. So I did a lot of like machinima filmmaking, like filmmaking via video games and stuff like that, and using video game engines from like a young age. But yeah, I feel like I've been doing it since I was like 8, so it's a big part of my life.
Well, awesome. That's so interesting to hear all the different influences that probably went into Judas Icarus. Mm-hmm. How would you describe the film?
How would I describe the movie? Yeah. I would describe it, I guess I kind of describe it as a sort of like an experiment in action filmmaking. I'm very interested in action film, but not necessarily interested in some of like the traditional forms of violence that like it contains and stuff like that. So I wanted to, explore that space in a different way.
Yeah, what kind of came up for me, but I know it's not your intention, or I don't think it's your intention for the film, is like Rocky or something, like the recovery film where, you know, the star athlete gets injured and will they recover? Will they be able to beat the opponent? Mm-hmm. Was that a starting point for you at all?
Yeah, I'm actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm pretty directly influenced by like the directorial works of Sylvester Stallone, for sure. I really enjoy like the Rocky movies, and I really enjoy sports and like the drama of sports and the drama of athletes. I think there's like a lot of interesting tension and drama there that the film medium has a pretty interesting history in sort of like examining, not just through cinema, but through things like sports and like the advent of certain technologies to further monitor or capture the achievements of athletes.
Mm-hmm. And wrestling is such an interesting one to kind of, it's not like boxing where it is obviously like real, but I always think wrestling is interesting because it's super real, but it's also like there's this element of performance that's always baked in. And I think I'm not a super big wrestling fan, but like depending on which type of wrestling you're into, like the TV kind or like the real kind, there is like that kind of that blur between what's real and what's not, which is kind of, I think, really nicely encapsulated in the film.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons that drew me towards wrestling as like a subject, is like the sort of like, different versions of like materiality that are there as far as like reality and sports and like what is actually happening. I definitely came to appreciate pro wrestling as like a very, very like real sport, and the theatrics of it, or the more scripted elements of it, being similar to that of something like in figure skating, where you have like dedicated movements or things that are certainly going to happen, but with that you can still create like a tension, and there's still like a ton of athleticism obviously that goes into those movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you get to know Judas Icarus? Because he is a real person.
Yes. Yes. He's very real. Judas is awesome. We met on our mutual friend Phoebe Parsons' film called I, Me, Mine. I was brought onto that film to help choreograph an action scene as well as be the cinematographer on it. And Judas was the person chosen by Phoebe, along with Travis Williams, who's also in the film Judas Icarus Twists His Wrist, to be essentially the stunt people. They had to wear like these like giant eyeball masks, and they just had to like brutally fight each other in a bar scene, essentially. So through that, we had like a pretty intensive like collaboration together that went on like very well. We just melded very quickly together creatively. And I think we were just all really excited about it and wanted to pursue further collaborations with one another.
And how did you come up with the pivot of the focal point of the film that like he injures himself or he like twists his wrist?
I think that comes from a lot of just personal experiences with things that I'm passionate towards. I have like my own athletic and like movement practice. I've been involved a lot with like martial arts and more recently basketball in like pretty like intense ways. And through those, I've gained like my own injuries as well as having like a pretty full on art practice in the form of like a personal practice as well as a career practice. A lot of moments of hurt have arisen from the pursuits of these. And I think I was just mostly inspired by, exploring that drama that happens like within our bodies, like when we're so dedicated to pursuing something that elements of like our traditional elements rather of like our health and safety are like pulled into question. And we get closer to those thresholds and to those lines, and they're painful, but they also help transition us into, what we pursue or like what we travel. So I think I was mostly just very curious about that tension and both like the positive and negatives that lie within there, and expressing or having a chance to express my own interactions with like these kinds of injuries or moments of hurt.
Yeah, I really got that throughout the film, that like that discipline and that like kind of the pushing through the, not just through the pain, but through the kind of the mental challenge of like recovering or like training with an injury, things like that. There was this one line in the film I really liked when I think it's his friend talking to him after he injures himself, where he says like, injury means you're on the shelf, pain means you're a professional athlete or professional wrestler.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a really good line. Was that like, did you write that?
No. That's good old Tony Jabroni just doing some training at the Lions dojo. Yeah.
Yeah, and like so there's this like element of wrestling that's obviously kind of centered in the film, but there's also a lot of metal music. I'm curious about, how did you decide to throw that in there?
I guess a lot went into that decision. I have like a personal attachment to metal, and specifically like heavier, noisier forms of metal, like thrash metal or black metal, and those forms of music. I think as like a youth, it was like a big part of my life and like my form of like expression, being like a screaming young person in metal bands and stuff like that, and was a very direct way for me to like express myself. And again, there's like this element, I think, of like pain or pushing one's limits, and just like how intensive metal is as like as an art and a discipline. So I think just like as like an early influence, it was something that like I wanted to like gravitate towards and like play with, as well as I just think I saw a lot of tangents between metal and wrestling. I think like when you actually just like look towards like wrestling as like a cultural moment or movement, there's like a lot of like more hardcore music or like themes of like punk or heavy metal sort of like imbued within, like at least like at like an aesthetical level, so it seemed fitting. But I think also just like and like what is explored through like the art, like I think wrestling really explores pain and sacrifice and like physical hardships on like a very surface level, and so does metal. I think metal like really explores some of like our more down or screaming feelings inside of us at like a very, very surface level. And I think those are like very rare feelings to be like so at the forefront, feelings of like rage or disappointment or frustration in an art. So I thought there was like a lot of unique parallels to draw from there. And then I took a lot of inspiration from silent film for this movie. And I think mostly I wanted to structure it like more like a piece of like classical music. I'm like really inspired by how classical music is structured. And so I knew the movie needed a musical backbone or just some sort of like musical representation to help move it along poetically. So music, I think, as such a prominent theme or element in the movie was really needed, and metal just seemed like a day one fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really got that throughout watching the film because like as a like in terms of its style, like so much of it signaled documentary to me, like the settings, like when Judas and his like his housemate, his roommate, the woman in the film who's like playing in the band, they're just in their like what looks to me like an East Van house, like you know, practicing and just like living their daily lives, and then like just the footage just screamed documentary to me, but then the way you edited it and the kind of special effects and the lighting and the music like carrying through the film like without any narration really kind of took it to a different place. And that was super strong. I really liked how there was no narration. Like it like really worked. Yeah. How did you edit that? What's your approach to editing?
My approach to editing is pretty, I don't know. Editing's like a really big playroom for me. I really like to be playful in editing, and I really like the opportunity to try all kinds of things out. I do have like an animation practice, so I feel like there's ways for me to get like pretty experimental with the ways I can blend my editing knowledge with animation skills and stuff like that. So I try to be very, very open about it. I think like the main sort of thing is that like editing is like very isolating. Like the rest of the film was really strung together through like collaboration. And I think also like in the movie there's a strong sense of like togetherness with the collaborators within the film, like Judas's relationship with Travis and the band being a band and stuff like that. So I think specifically for this movie, editing felt very strange because it was really lonely compared to other parts. So my approach, I tried to be like a lot more focused with this movie. I would do like a lot of writing. I would try to, instead of just like hopping into the editing room and using my script and what I already knew what I wanted, and just like kind of starting assembling things, I would write myself pretty strict instructions almost of like what I wanted to accomplish in a session. As well as I would try to talk about it a lot with my friends just to like get it more into the world and like feel like a bit more collaborative on it. The movie also had like pretty rigorous like pre-visualization because we were such a small budget film and we were shooting with what is essentially like stunts because they're, you know, jumping and hurting each other and all that. I had to have like a pretty sort of like very focused vision of like what I actually wanted to capture on like a day to day. So we weren't able to really shoot it in like a traditional documentary style where you just have so many days to capture all this stuff. So when going into editing, what I actually had to work with, I knew quite well because I had planned it also pretty like fairly rigorously. And there was a script that informed like all of these like flowing moments together. So as far as like the actual structure and like moment to moment of stringing the film together, it was a lot more on rails or pre-envisioned compared to like other films I've done, which again like are more of like the documentary style of editing where you're really finding things in the edit and you're sort of like discovering like what you've shot and then stringing it together and making connections that way. I tried to take a lot more of like an animation approach to things as far as like a post-production workflow. And then, because I was handling most of the post-production myself, including the visual effects and animation and all those elements that went into the movie, I knew that there would be a lot of labor going into those parts. So I tried to have less guessing in the edit and allow myself the sort of room to work in the animation and the visual effects parts a bit more and have those to be a bit more exploratory. Yeah.
Wow, that's super fascinating because watching it, it feels so organic that I wouldn't be able to tell that like it was kind of like really maybe like pre-formulated or there was like such a structure to the process of it. Were there like despite you having like such a I guess like a workflow kind of set out, were there any sort of obstacles or unexpected like things that happened during production or post-production that you had to kind of I don't know like kind of work through?
I'm not sure. Not really during production. Like, I think that a lot of like what motivated like what we were going to shoot and how we were going to shoot it happened through like pretty like extensive conversations between Judas, Travis, myself, and some of the other key collaborators like cinematographer Suze Friesen. Um, so there wasn't a lot of like unexpected things. I feel like the unexpected elements more came up through those conversations. Like I'm a big fan of wrestling, but I don't know it at the level of intimacy as the wrestlers do. Or I have a different perspective on it. I have the audience perspective,
Right.
which is very different from the wrestler's perspective. So a lot of the surprises actually came through our conversations and me kind of getting a bit more of like a look behind the curtain and how they handle it and the language they use around it. And um, we kind of tackled a lot of those surprises more at like a script level. Like I went through like a lot of like script writing because my understanding of Judas towards his practice was changing very dynamically. So I think just for an example, some of those surprises were the way that they consider it a sport, or the way that they like consider it real, or the way that they talk about like the materiality of like wrestling within like our reality, and like the way that they see it as both artistic performance as well as like sport and something that you can actually be better at than somebody else, and competitive factors. So that was really interesting. That was something that was like really surprising to me. I think before I had imagined it a bit more theatrically, and just to hear how they holistically treated it as like an act, like a competitive sport, was pretty shocking to me, and forced me to like just reapproach how I thought about it. In editing, honestly, I think the biggest surprises was that like I almost at like a level of irony, I could not stop becoming injured throughout the like post-production process.
Okay.
And people around me were sort of like commenting on like how this movie was sort of like cursing me essentially because I was being so intimate with this fabricated injury that I had like devised, that it was like sort of like seeping into my own life. So I had to figure out like a lot of ways of working around injury. Editing is something I'm like pretty first or second nature at. So having things at like a physical level like really interrupt that was like pretty shocking. And then it also obviously, I think in like a very real time sort of way, made me face the themes of like my movie again,
Yeah.
sort of. Usually at the editing phase, I'm like, I know this. I know what's
Yeah.
going on in here. I'm just going to stitch it all together. I was like pretty taken aback by the level of like rediscovery I had to go through at like that phase. Even up until like color correction, it was just like, yes, like I have to rethink about how I feel about this whole subject again.
Wow, it's like a very you had a very embodied editing process.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you like when you said making this film kind of changed your understanding of wrestling? Do you think that happened on the other side too for Judas and maybe the I don't know her name, but the woman in the
show
show.
Blunderfield.
Yeah. Do you think their understanding of their craft or their artistic process changed through, I guess, being a part of this film and having it documented and explored in this way?
I'm not really sure. That would be an awesome thing for me to talk with them about. I'd be very curious about that myself. I can't really speak at like an intimate level about that. Sho and I have worked on movies before together. So I think she was a bit more familiar with like how I approach films and production and stuff like that. I think for Judas, at least like what he has like relayed to me was that we didn't really fabricate like a lot of stuff. So I don't think it was a very very surprising to him at like a wrestling level. He was very much just wrestling, and he informed a lot of the choreography and went into the movie at like a movement based level. But I think that there was and there was a few moments in the movie where we would have to do takes. And I think the repetitiveness of having to do the same thing over and over and over and over again sort of gave him potentially new perspective on exactly like what he was doing, and sort of, I think, had a couple of like out of body experiences of just like really examining some of the more peculiar elements of like this like sport and stuff like that, because usually it's a live thing, they do it, it's like one and done. There's like a lot of like surprises, there's a lot of improvising that goes on in the sport. So I think just to have to like iterate through micro movements of it over and over just brought like a peculiarness to him, or just like different sort of ways of looking at the kinds of movements he does. And then he was also very new to filmmaking. I think this was like his first like formal film project. So I think that really bolstered an interest in doing more performance of this kind. Yeah.
Yeah, as you're speaking about the micro movements and like the choreography of wrestling, it made me just really kind of get how similar it is to like playing music and being in a band, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. Every time you play a song, it's like different. There's so much improvisation when it's live, and like it is like wrestling. I'm just thinking about it in a totally different way now that like that wrestling is kind of like a performance art in itself. And yeah, it's like it's pretty cool that you put those two together in the film like that, because it feels like when I was watching it, like it made so much sense, but not in like some sort of like easy to explain kind of way, like the metal and the wrestling together. Like it was almost like they were like wrestlers in the ring together in the space of the film, like two characters. And like I'm just like, oh, like which one won out? But in the end, I feel like both were winners.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a question I like to ask everyone on the show. What to you is special about the short film? Like what makes you kind of take on the format of the short film?
Sorry, how do you mean format?
Like as opposed to like, I don't know, maybe like a mid-length or like a feature-length documentary or something.
Right. Like, sorry, like what makes it special as like a short film kind of thing?
Yeah. What to you is special about the short film? Like.
Oh, the short film medium.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got you. I'm not too sure. I don't. I think when I approach projects personally, I don't think of duration too much. I don't really think of things too much as like too long or too short, or I just don't really think of them, at least when I'm structuring like my own films, as far as like I don't think of them in like minutes, I guess. I think what I like about short films, and just, speaking towards like this project, is that it's simply the right sized container for the feeling I have. I think that I don't feel I feel like everything I need to like say about the sort of drama that Judas Icarus is going through, or that I have been through, is that length kind of thing. I think also similarly, like I mentioned before, I'm really motivated by classical music and its structure kind of thing. So I feel like at like a personal level, something being 15 minutes really just like makes sense to me, because I'm so conditioned by the length and sort of like pacing of movements of classical music. And yeah, usually there's somewhere between like 8 to 15 minutes for like a section within a symphony kind of thing. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, I've maybe part of my brain is just like conditioned to sort of like compartmentalize the stories I imagine within like that length or something. But yeah, I also really enjoy, I think, speaking towards like short film and this project particularly, and the project of, or like the idea of like exploring like these like moments of pain or conflict, is to me these moments feel very brief. Like they feel like very identifiable and vibrant, but they feel like very like brief moments. Like I think like the drama of being hurt, like when you have trauma towards it, and you remember it, it's like it's flashes, right? Like it's not very like a very sustained feeling or experience. And so I feel like something that I wanted to do was to try and capture the briefness of these moments. I think that's like where a lot of like the fast cutting and stuff comes from, is like the impact of like how like a brief expression that you like receive or give out to the world can have like an effect, or how much like one like hit can like really change like your whole life kind of thing, or how like one note in like a song can like suddenly like really change how you like feel about a moment in the world. And so I feel like it feels natural for the film to be short in light of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have this popcorn box.
Popcorn box.
Yeah, we have a popcorn box. Would you like to pull a question from the popcorn box?
Yeah. I'll go for it.
Get that nice
Do I
popcorn
hand this
rustle.
to you, or do I read this?
You can read it. Yeah.
And then I answer it? Right.
I guess it made more sense if I read it, but
That's okay. What's a film that you think should have a sequel, and what would it be about? I don't know.
these are tough questions.
That's a really tough question.
I feel like too many films have sequels.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a sequel to my movie.
Oh,
That would be cool. Yeah.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I'd love to work with Judas again, and I like making movies, so that's
It's fate.
yeah. I really don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I think about movies as far as like really requiring sequels. I really like actually Babe. I think there should be a third Babe movie.
I love Babe.
Yeah.
It's my Christmas movie. I cry every time I see it.
Oh, nice.
I don't know why.
How do you feel about the sequel?
It was great.
Yeah, I also agree. I watched it like a week and a half ago for like the dozenth time. It's awesome. And I feel like George Miller can really just like hit it, and pigs are great. Yeah, I think Babe 3 is my choice.
All right. Movie studios listening to this podcast. Babe 3. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Kerr.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You have been listening to the VIFF Podcast. Thanks to our community broadcast partner, Tell Us Story Hive, for their support. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review the podcast and hit subscribe for more conversations like this one. Visit VIFF.org to learn more about the Vancouver International Film Festival and to see what's on at the VIFF Center year-round. Thanks.